This is Banfield Park on the Selkirk waters. And that means a lot to me because my grandfather, Scottish grandfather, a reiver, a border robber in Scotland, lived in the town of Selkirk. So it's full circle. Well, Kerrisdale was a middle class, working class area when I was growing up at UBC. High achieving and very naughty. And we would have one of our math geniuses would get up and show the teacher how to do it on, the theory of relativity on the blackboard. Would take up all the blackboards in the room, and they were very good teachers because they had a separate hiring board. And as I was just telling you, we had a stellar teacher in the arts, Harry Locke, who was the first Chinese teacher hired by the A school board in Vancouver, because there'd been separate schools until then. And Harry was an inspiration to all of us, even the math nerds. And then he went to West Van and taught Alan Twigg. So there's a connection. If I believe anything, it's that we owe our children the very best start in life. And if you don't take the trouble to nurture them and teach them well, then you might as well give up. And unfortunately, in our school systems, still there's separation and competition, which follows the capitalist model. And our schools, of course, were designed to provide a workforce for the capitalist system. And I don't hate capitalism, but I hate excess. And it's just the whole world is permeated with competition, and we see it now in the cruelty of one person to another. And that leads me to my first vocation is probably teaching, second to writing, or maybe vice versa. But writing is the same thing, that it's a priesthood, and it's not about religion, it's about morals and good behavior and kindness, and we can somehow keep on working to get that message across in our work. And sometimes it's difficult because even writers have become way more competitive than satisfies me. I'm really unhappy with it. And you noticed this morning that the door had been torn off our book box, and somebody's been vandalizing it and taking my books and putting them in the garbage in this beautiful park full of amazing birds and dogs and all kinds of critters. And I know that it has probably something to do with somebody bitter. And there are too many people left bitter in this world. I think it's a writer's job to lift us out of that, even when we're telling sad stories. That person's unhappy, and that maybe I have something to do with it. That I have privileges they don't have. I don't know. Or they don't like what I write about, which is a tough tit, I'm not going to change at this point in life. Well, we were living in an old house that we'd restored in Kerrisdale, an old farmhouse, and we had the opportunity to move to the country, which my husband at the time really wanted to do. He'd had wonderful experiences as a child on a sheep farm on, I think it was Gabriola, and so we traded our house in Kerrisdale for 90 acres in Chemainus, in between number 11 and Tussey Road reserves, which turned out to be not only a wonderful experience in animal husbandry. We raised sheep, and our wool was used for Cowichan sweaters. So every time I see a Cowichan sweater, I think maybe a friend of mine is part of it, one of our little critters. And a marvelous opportunity for me to learn, for my children to learn about community, because one of the things we suppressed in Indigenous community is a beautiful way of being together and sharing. And yes, you have chiefs. I'm writing a book right now about Chief Tony Hunt, who irritated a lot of people, but also, and irritated me because he wasn't a feminist and other things, but he brought his art to the attention of the world, to Kwakwaka'wakw culture. And that door is now open, and now it's flooding. So it's a wonderful thing. He died 6 years ago, and there hasn't been a potlatch so far to celebrate his life, which breaks my heart. And there are people who feel differently about him. So I decided, he asked me to write his biography, and I said, we'll see. He liked the way I combined gossip with art criticism, or personal detail. So he wanted me to do it, but I was not happy with him. And his son was a very different kind of character, and he died too young, and I loved him. So I'm having trouble, but I decided the way around it was to get many voices, to ask all kinds of people how Tony affected their life and their vocation. My grandmother, her first playmate in Vancouver was the daughter of Chief Capilano, who became the mother of the grandparents of, anyway, blah, 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 Luke Marston, a wonderful young Salish artist, came to visit me recently, and I interviewed him for Tony's book. And it was his great-great-granny who played with my grandmother, or granny, I don't know, his great-grandmother, I'm not sure. But anyway, we're related, all my relations. So even though the Indian Act pushed us apart, and law was unfriendly to their culture, and we were deprived of learning from their culture, it's coming back together in the nicest ways. That's what I hope to do. So anyway, living in Chemainus was a dream. I made friends with Maggie Jack, who is a forest keeper, and she taught me to make cedar root baskets. She taught me about medicine. I can still tell you if something happens, you know, what's good for you. Make some cedar tea, maybe take some dock and rub it on that stinging that'll burn, whatever. Maggie was my spirit mother and my teacher. My kids grew up in that culture, and they're loving people. And they're people who are not ambitious for personal success, but to fish and to garden and to love one another. And two families, I have 3 children, 2 of them live in the same house, and we call it the big house. So we've been so lucky. And oh, I told you earlier that I'm wearing these earrings today from Copper Canoe Woman, which is a new startup by women, yay, in Lummi Island, and they're making indigenous jewelry, which is really sculpture. But I love the hands, because hands are welcome and hands are lifting us up. My great-grandmother moved to Victoria in the early 20th century. She was a pariah. Her first husband was one of the financing people for the Panama Canal, a bank in Vienna, the Rosenfeld Bank, which was financing the Panama Canal. And they went bust, or they got stressed financially because of all the problems that came up with malaria and topography and disease and so on. And the Morgan Bank in the United States came in and rescued it, and also rescued my great-grandmother, who left her husband, who killed himself. His name was Baron von Rosenfeld, and my mother always told me they were aristocrats, and I said no, they were Jews who lent money to the emperors. Anyway, my grandmother had to come here with her new husband because they were not spoken to in New York, where he was from. So that's how we started up here. And then in the 1980s, late 80s, I got a job at UVic, and I was going to come down a couple of days a week. And eventually, we just decided we'll move down here. My first husband and I separated, and but we lived in the same house, a McClure house. And we all lived on different floors, and there were people renting too. So it was a big house. And then eventually I met Rick, and now we live here. And a lot of people said, oh, that's a rough part of town. Oh, goody gumdrops. So we're all for it. We love it here. Now it's being yuppified, of course. The park used to be a place for rumbles, and I was the mom who came in and told the kids to go home, or they'd be going home in body bags. And they called me a lot of names, which I really don't care about. I used to say to my kids when they were bad, I'm not in the love business here. You know, you can be mad at me, but you're going to be straight.